Volcanic Fissure is a new fiery slam skill that can be used with staves, maces, axes, and unarmed attacks. Strike the ground to create a chasm that winds towards your target. This chasm can path around corners before erupting as the fissure gets as close as it can reach. It releases a burst of fiery projectiles that explode on striking the ground. Enemies hit by multiple impacts will take a lot of stacked damage. Use it up close for reliable bursts of damage, or aim far away to damage a larger area.
Welcome back, you filthy exiles. So still working away, we'll be here until league start. But anyway, if you want an interesting build to try with a new skill, and I am absolutely not saying to play this, by the way, because I think we've all learned our lessons. Playing new skills at league start is sometimes a really good idea, like with Lightning Conduit, and other times a terrible idea. And so, prefacing before we start the video, I am absolutely not saying that you should play this skill. If you do want to, though, then this is one way that you potentially could get it to work. Now, we'll know more when the Path of Building changes and updates come out later in the piece. Anyway, we're talking about Volcanic Fissure. Now, for anyone who's followed my channel, I've obviously been posting videos for a few years now. I did actually put together a 3.17 guide on how to get slam totems to work, and this skill, funnily enough, looks extremely similar to Consecrated Path or Tectonic Slam. Now, making sure that this is a slam skill, obviously we can see in the I guess the identifier of the skill that yes, it is a slam skill. So we know that. That's great. Now, it fires projectiles on slam. It does 60% physical damage converted to fire. Now, a skill that makes sense to compare this to right now, and obviously we'll get into the tree, is Consecrated Path. So, less the projectiles, we get 50% physical damage converted to fire. So, give or take 10%. There'll be a slight deviation. Now, I would assume that this will have some form of projectile damage as well. So, you know, we could use something like, I don't know, Shrieking Bolts, or, you know, something like that to buff that up if you target projectile damage. But, pardon me, the merely physical scaling in the tree and totem damage scaling should be enough to boost it up. So, how would we play a build like this? Well, we could play it like exactly the way I've got it set out here, a slam build. Now, for anyone who's played a slam build before, or a slam totem build, I should say, and I'll sort of explain the mechanics, and I've actually got this written into the notes of the tree. So, it does require a few uniques to make this work, because this is fundamentally a strength stacking build, so you're going to want to stack up a huge amount of strength. You're going to use the Chieftain, obviously, because it's targeted towards totem-based skills, and it scales the best on the strength side of the tree. Now, I'm not going to tell you that the Hierophant would work here. Hierophant's more for spell totems, not for physical damage slam totems. But if you want to try it, you're welcome to try it. Wouldn't recommend it. But hey, you know, we're in uncharted territory at this stage. So fundamentally, the mechanics of how this build works and how to get this working is you need to stack a shitload of strength, and you pull damage from your Crown of the Eyes, which is this item here, which basically gives you the ability to increase, so increases and reductions to spell damage, also applies to attacks at 150% of their value. This applies to your totems, and so this item is pretty much needed for this skill to, for this to work. The other thing that you need is a Brutus Lead Sprinkler. So what this does is it gives you 4 to 7 fire damage to attacks with this weapon per 10 strength. And what that basically means is the more strength that you got, the more damage you're going to do with the weapon, and the weapon damage converts to the totem that does the damage for you, because you can basically no longer damage anything with spells or whatever, because you're going to be using Ancestral Bond on the tree. Another key item that you'll need, Alberon's Warpath. Now, initially, this item, even with the changes to drop rates, is really easy to get in League, though for people who are sort of cautious about playing builds at League Start with uniques, yes, I completely understand this has uniques, and that's why I'm not recommending to play it at League Start unless you're really hell-bent on wanting to play Volcanic Fissure. Now, Astramentis is another really critical item. Because we need to stack a shitload of strength, we get an extra, in this case, 112 plus 14. So what's that? 126 strength just off the amulet. And then we run Shaman's Dominion as well, which beefs up our totem damage further. Now, I do have a lot of gems in here. Plus side to the tree that I'm actually going to provide you. And we'll talk about the way that, I guess, this tree is constructed as, you know, close to the end of the video. But this is a level 40, a level 70, and a level 96 leveling tree. So you could potentially league start with this and level it through the rungs and go crazy with it. And skill-wise, I'm not too sure when Volcanic Fissure is actually going to be available. Let's have a look. What, say, level 12. So it's actually available from like level, what, it'd be available from like level 6 or level 11 or something like that. So in Act 1, it'll be available. So realistically, if we look at like a leveling start, you could potentially level with this if you can get, I'm pretty sure you can get the Slam Totem Earthbreaker support skills straight up in Act 1. So for all argument's sake, you could potentially level with this skill. Now, am I saying it's going to be good to level with? I have no idea. That's why I'm not recommending this build. As I said, if you want to play it, I'm going to say this multiple times throughout the video, because there'll be someone in the comments who will say, but this is a new skill and rah, 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 and they won't have actually listened to it. So if I say it like 20, 30 times in the video, then at some point they're going to listen to it. Anyway, so I'm not recommending that you level with this skill. I don't know how it's going to behave. I don't know if it's going to be good, but potentially if you wanted to try it, you could, and you will be able to from, you know, day dot. So this looks like it's available at Act 1, which makes it a hell of a lot easier to level with. Now, that's pretty much the baseline mechanics. A few other things that you need to understand about totem builds in particular, because they are unique, and when I really broke this down, I had to really understand it myself. So Ancestral Protector is a significant buff to your totems. So to get the amount of damage, and this actually cracks out to, you know, 1.6 mil in aggregate. We assume we only have two, you know, main damage totems, which are still doing a lot of damage. That is based on the sort of gearing that is in here, though. You get to a good amount of damage. When you go up to level 90, it's actually level 94. You get to like 16.9 million DPS in aggregate. So if you can get an extra totem on that, even better. So that's one thing to keep in mind. This does do a shitload of damage. Now, the damage reduction on this particular build isn't great, and it's something that you could adjust. You could remove Anger and put Determination in, and that will give you a lot of armor. You could run a Blasphemy Aura now and switch out your Anger, and then add in, like, you know, some other skill, I don't know what, to do, you know, War Banner, to do a little more physical damage, which will scale up your fire damage, and that's another alternative, which would sort of equalize out 45% versus 50% mana reservation. So there are things like that that could be tweaked in this build. So that's why I'm not saying this is an absolute sort of tree. This is what I built a little while ago, and it worked really well at just going face on enemies. But it may not be conducive to your playstyle. You might want more defense, so you might want to change it up a little bit from a defensive layer. So, from a defense layer perspective. Now, some of the other things that max out damage. So, obviously, the Ancestral Protector Totems increase the attack speed of your totems. So, there are other ways to get that effect as well. So, you can run Ancestral Guidance, and my recommendation is to double stack Ancestral Guidance. And this is going to give you 30% increased effect of buffs of your Ancestral Totems, which is going to buff your Ancestral Protector Totem. And the other thing you want to do is you want to run an Ancestral Protector Totem that's actually a Phantasmal Ancestral Protector Totem. So when you increase the quality of the totem skill gem, it's going to increase the effect, which is going to increase the speed of your totems that you're attacking with. Now, the other thing too is the actual helm enchant that you want to get is that your protector totems grant 18% increased attack speed while active. This means, again, you're buffing your protector totems to then counter buff your in this case volcanic fissure totems. So these are some things that will really amp up your damage early on. If you get the skill working, focus on that. So generally when you go to a boss, you're going to hit a protector totem. It's going to pop 2 totems. You're going to hit a war chief totem. that's going to increase your physical damage, and all these effect buff increases increase the damage output of those totems and the effect they have on your other 2 totems. And then you're going to want to pop 2 of your Volcanic Fissure Totems, and they're just going to do absolutely stupid amounts of damage. Now, arguably, we also don't know the effect of, I guess, where the fissure travels to from the totem. So does that lock on to the enemy? And if that's the case, then you could cast this skill from a ways back away from an enemy, and it could just off-screen shit. And theoretically, right now, I'm starting to think that that might be the case, which could mean this could be a really, really good slam totem skill. Similar to Consecrated Path, but without the downside of the totem traveling, because what that would actually mean is the totem could taunt enemies if you cast it in front of you, and then the fissure will run off and kill the enemies around the further outside of the totem range, which would mean that the totems take all the damage, you can walk around behind the totems and survive shit, and then the enemies die off screen, which theoretically is fantastic. But anyway, that's just my sort of mechanical breakdown of how totems work. As you can tell, I really understand totems after playing it for a couple leagues, and I really enjoy totems. This is actually going to be my second build that I'm going to run after I run my Vortex build. It's really tempting to play at league start, but I want to have a really clean league start, and we've got Christmas, so I can really master this. Now, where this can go, what a lot of totem players do is they actually get the aspect of Carnage, Forbidden Flesh and Forbidden Flame Jewels, put that in their build, you get 40% increased damage, and then you literally just nuke shit, and you don't even need to stand near it. So, theoretically, if the damage scales of Volcanic Fissure really well, it could be just ridiculously overpowered and like 2-hit shit. So, well, not 2-hit shit, but like a few hit shit. Anyway, that's the mechanics. This is all in the notes as well, so I've actually put in where all the damage comes from, because you also use Assassin Mark in this. War's Herald also has a pretty significant effect off the Chieftain Ascendency. So, War's Herald. So, again, this buffing effect of your totems while active as well is 100% buffing effect, which means you're getting 100% buff effect from your Protector and your War Chief totem. So, this Ascendancy is really built to absolutely maximize the buffing effect of those particular totems, and they, in effect, affect your Volcanic Fissure totems, theoretically, doing the bunny ears, and you get an absolute fuck ton of damage. So anyway, let's get into the gearing setup, and I'll explain what you need to do to get this to work in theory, and just in case you do want to play it starter, but I'm not recommending it. Alright, let's get into the next section of the video. Okay, we'll look at item setup at like a maximum level. Like, you can do whatever you want with this tree, you can play with it or do whatever. Like, I'm assuming the people who would play this build would be sort of able to adjust the tree, but I'll try and explain this in a way that's pretty beginner friendly too. In an element, I wouldn't recommend playing this as a beginner build because it's an untested skill. So obviously the first item you're going to want is a Brutus Lead Sprinkler. Generally in League, this is a really simple item to get. And so, yeah, you really need this item to make this work. This is basically how most regular totem builds work at this stage of the game. The big significant part of this is the more strength that you stack, the more damage you get. You get 4 to 7 fire damage to attacks per from this weapon per strength. So that's pretty significant. If you completely stack 2,000, 2,500 strength, you're just going to get absolutely face-melting levels of damage off this. So really cheap item, really great effect. Now, it's really important to bear in mind that you need a shield that gives you an extra totem. So I would not recommend using trying to remember what it is. It was Tukahama's. I can't remember it. Anyway, I would recommend the shield that you need to get will be a shield with +1 number of totems on it. Now, usually you get this from Unveiled. It'll be an Unveiled mod, and I'm reasonably sure this is an Elrion Unveiled mod, and it is a little bit of a hard one to get. So technically you could craft this, and I would recommend crafting it. The shield that I had in this build wasn't really good. You want one with a lot more armor. You also want one that gives you Socketed Gems have reservation efficiency. so that you can run more auras in the build, or you can beef up your auras in the build so you can run more auras at the end of the day. So that's pretty much a good target to get. You also want +1 to number of socketed totems, and if you can get max resist, or if you can get chaos resist and life regeneration, damn McAfee. Anyway, then that's what you want. Now, Crown of the Eyes, Crown of Eyes. This is actually one that drops off div cards. You usually get a lot of these div cards as you play the game natively, so you will need this one to be able to get this build to really crack in and work really well. The Iron Fortress. Now, with this one here, sorry, I should explain Crown of Eyes. So, increases and reductions to spell damage, which you'll select throughout the tree, and also the way that your totems sort of scale. That's going to apply to, you know, attacks at 150% their value. So any increases to spell damage or anything, so totem nodes, everything, that's going to amp up by 150%. So it's quite significant, which is why this is the go-to item for shield builds. Totem builds. You'll see this on most totem builds. And the actual enchant, as I noted at the very start of the video on the mechanics breakdown, you really need this to beef up the attack speed buff that you get from your Ancestral Protector Totems, and that's going to really amp up the damage that your theoretical Volcanic Fissure Totems is going to output. Now, the next item you could switch out, and I do have a selection here of different things. You could go Belly of the Beast for defense. You'll lose a bit of offense, so you'll still do a heap of damage, but you'll be much, much tankier. You could run Ambu's Charge. Yeah, it might be the only 6 link that you can get early on, so you can run that in that. But the ideal item that you want is Iron Fortress. The reason why the Iron Fortress is such a really a great item for this build is the strength damage bonus instead that you usually get instead grants you 3% increased melee physical damage per 10 strength. And because of stacking strength, that means the more strength that you stack, the more ability it is to up your melee damage. And having a look at the actual skill for Volcanic Fissure, we can actually see that it classifies as a melee skill. So it will derive a benefit from that buff. So that's a pretty significant item. Now, you won't get this straight away. This is available in League. It was originally a prophecy item, and then they obviously got rid of prophecies. So this will be something that is going to probably cost you a lot. If you can get it on 6 link and then just sell 6 link, it's probably going to be the cheapest way. Alternatively, they changed the corrupted fusings, whatever it is. I always forget the names of stuff when I'm doing videos. Tainted fusings. They changed the rate to which you can 6 link back to like 15, within 15 fuses on a corrupted item, you'll be able to 6 link it. So theoretically, if you get a really cheap Iron Fortress, a 6-socket one, or you get a someone who's bricked a 6-socket corrupted fortress, like not bricked as in turn it into a rare, but they've tried to corrupt it and it wasn't linked or something like that, whatever, then you could 6-socket a non-6-socketed corrupted Iron Fortress, and then work from there, or you could just take a 6-socketed Iron Fortress, chance corrupt it, chance val it, as in val it, hope that it doesn't fuck up on brick, and then you could 6-link it really, really easily, and that might potentially be the cheapest way that you can 6-link your chess piece. Nudge, nudge, hint, hint. And it predominantly needs red sockets, so really, really easy to scale up. So that's one such solution that you could operate with to get this to sort of endgame much quicker. The Iron Fortress, is it needed for endgame play? No, you could switch it out for anything else. You're going to make it to red maps without an Iron Fortress, but if you want to drop endgame bosses much quicker, then the Iron Fortress is going to be pretty much the go-to at that point. So the next item I had was just some standard gloves. Now, Leech wasn't really like the best thing to have on this build, but I had it, and you do get Leech from your totems because of the War Herald's effect from the Chieftain. Are these the best gloves? Not really. You can get way better gloves, and implicit gloves are going to be even better with fire exposure on hit. Now, do I know if that works with totems? Not entirely, but worth a shot trying, isn't it? Alberon's Warpath. Again, another really good item to have in the build, mainly because you get a percentage increase to strength, and that's what makes this a really good item. Now, the actual enchant on it's really going to depend on whether you want defensive layering, stun immune, or like stun resistance and things like that. You can get a whole lot of different enchants, movement speed. I had crit on mine. You don't necessarily need that, but this is going to play a big part in amping up your damage. Astramentis, you want this with Shaman's Dominion, which is the anoint. And the main reason for this item, obviously, is strength stacking, so you want a lot of strength, and this is going to give you a lot of strength. Now, my other rings, I sort of just had, like, you know, strength. My precursor to every item I had was strength on it, because of strength stacking, we want a shitload of strength. I had a belt that dropped with an implicit 10% level of strength. Now, if you can't get this, look for a string of servitude with a strength roll on it, and that's gonna, or an attribute roll on it, and that's gonna give you a ton of strength early on, and it's gonna be relatively, well, hopefully, depending on the league, we don't know what the market's gonna be like, so that's gonna be relatively cheap. Now, I had Cinder Swallow, Rumi's Concoction, Diamond Flask, all that sort of jazz on the build. I didn't really focus around block because I'm using totems, so I wasn't anticipating getting hit. Now, jewel-wise, and I'll just go to the tree to explain the jewels. Well, actually, we'll talk about the cluster jewels when we get to the section on cluster jewels. So the jewels I had a Watcher's Eye that beefed up crit multi with anger. So this tree uses a lot of crit, so we get up to like 84% crit, which is where a lot of our damage comes from. And then pretty much everything else is like max out one-handed damage melee weapon crit where you could, and crit multi. And so you can do that quite easily. You're going to want life and any other resistance. That's pretty much the 3 rolls that you want to really amp up your skills. So like this is like a perfect scenario where you have crit multi, increase, maximum life and resistances, and that's going to cap you out, and that's going to be the best approach for gearing. That's pretty much it for gearing. Now, earlier items, you're not going to have a Brutus lead sprinkler. Pretty much anything's going to go. I actually put in the notes what you want to prioritize. So from gearing, you want Brutus lead sprinkler first, Crown of Eyes, Alberons, and then Astramentis, and then everything else after that. And that's pretty much it for the gearing section. Okay, so for skills, just imagine that Consecrated Path is actually Volcanic Fissure, because they're very similar in nature, just without projectiles. So, and bear in mind, like, we're going to have projectile damage and base hit damage with this too. So that's going to be really interesting to see how that scales and if it synergizes with this. That's why I'm a little unsure with this one, but I'll put this video out anyway, because I think I've made it quite clear at this stage that this is not a recommended starter build, but if you wanted to try it from starter, you could. At your own risk. Don't blame me if you ruin your league. This is just a really sort of deep dive into how you could get it to work. So you'd run Volcanic Fissure as your main skill. Elemental focus, because we're not going to ignite, which sort of defeats the reason of why you'd run a Cinder Swallow Flask. But if you can find another outlet for ignite, which would actually be your other totems, then that's fine. Earthbreaker, obviously you need Earthbreaker to make this work, because, you know, it's sort of a significant skill. This is what gives you slam totems at the end of the day, so you need this on your setup. Elemental damage with attacks, absolutely. Awaken Fire penetration, yes, and you want it at level 5. This is going to give you fire exposure on hit to enemies, and then Ruthless. So I don't think fire exposure works with elemental focus. I have to double check that. And then you want Ruthless, because the more blows that you hit against enemies, the more damage you're going to do, which is quite significant. Now, you could potentially max this out and put in like crit multi, increase crit damage, which doesn't really change the way that it works. It's around the same damage. You could experiment and switch those out, but that's basically what you want to run it all with. And these aren't even Awaken. If you wanted to run Awaken, you're actually going to get even more damage out of it, but I kept it reasonably easy because these were all pretty straightforward gems to get. And you could get, you know, alternate quality gems. I don't know what they're going to take the form of yet with Volcanic Fissure, but potentially they could be quite OP too. Don't know yet. So, you know, we'll find out. Then we want to have Ancestral War Chief. Now, you don't have to use Val. You can take Val off and you can just use standard your damage is going to drop, but Val's pretty significant with faster attacks. The reason why you don't want to overlap this with your Protector Totems is because it'll cast 2, and I'm pretty sure this actually goes up to 5 totems in total, with the +1 totem on the shield and also Ancestral Bond. You get 1 totem per skill gem, so it gets to 5. And the reason why is when you drop your 2 Protector Totems, you then can drop your Ancestral Warchief Totem. It drops 1, and then just spring 2 or 3 of your Volcanic Fissure Totems, and then that gets you to 5 totems, and that should be able to body the boss. So yeah, you want to isolate your Ancestral Warchief Totem to just on its own. You don't want to link it with your Ancestral Protector Totem. On this build, I have Anger, Precision, with Enlighten, and Assassin's Mark. Now, if you don't want to use Anger, you want more defense, you can run Determination, nothing wrong with that. Does this build work better with physical damage, which would be Pride? Let's have a look. Not really. It's way less damage if you run Pride, so Anger is what you want to use. Ancestral Protector. So this is your Ancestral Protector Totem. You want multiple totems with this one. You want Blind. I use Blind as a defense layer, so you can blind the enemy with your totems, and Combustion is going to ignite the enemy, which is going to buff up your Cinder Swallow and actually make that work, and also cause negative 10% fire resistance to the enemy as well, so that's going to apply a lot more damage, so theoretically that should work too. On my ring, I had Steel Skin just mapped to my move button. You don't need that. You could put up a better defensive setup and switch out some skills, entirely up to you. On this, I also had high impact mines that cast Wave of Conviction with charge mines. This was to get like power charges, frenzy charges, and whatever, and endurance charges, and also allowed me to apply Wave of Conviction on enemies. So basically the idea was throw a shitload of mines, blow them up, and then have your totems do all the damage, and then that will do an absolute ton of damage to the enemy, and yeah, you will walk away pretty well off. But entirely up to you. You don't need this in the build necessarily. It's not a disadvantage to have it. But if you want to switch this out for more defensive options, then you could do that too. And then finally, I had Blood and Sand, which just increased the area of effect damage. With Volcanic Fissure, this is actually going to be pretty significant, so this is probably going to have a good effect. And then I had Clarity as well, because obviously the Chieftain is not the best at managing mana. Now, when you're early on, you're probably going to want to run Life Tap into this somewhere, and then switch out one of the skills to get more damage when you can sort of confidently sustain mana. But that would be my recommendation as to how to deal with the mana problem this will probably cause you. Anyway, that's basically it for the skill gem setups. Okay, so for the tree, and let's go back to the level 40 tree. So everybody likes the leveling tree. So anyway, we're going to come down from the starter area. We're going to move up, and we want to go straight to Iron Will. So our strength applies to all spell damage as well, and that means that our totem skills are buffed up by our strength, because totem skills are spell skills generally. I'd have to double check that with Earthbreaker though. Let's confirm that now so nobody calls me out. No, it's totem skill. So anyway, whatever. So this just means strength applies to spell damage. Potentially that's an identifier for totems. I'm not entirely sure, but it works, so let's go with that. Now, coming down, we're going to go all the way down. We'll take Lava Lash. This is going to give you that first early buff of fire damage for your skills and your totems. And then 1% fire damage per, increased fire damage per 20 strength. We obviously strength stacks, so this is significant. Now, we're going to want to come all the way up. Now, you could take Call to Arms if you want to run War Cries like Infernal Cry. Entirely up to you, or Enduring Cry if you want more defensiveness. Can do that. You want to come straight all the way up until you get to Ancestral Bond and Pain Forger, because obviously we run maces. This is going to increase your crit chance, and you get Purity of Flesh. Now, arguably, you could cut across here early and then build down and link it back up. I'll leave it up to you as to how you want to build it. As I said, not necessarily recommending this as a starter build, but it's definitely an option. by level 40 anyway, you'll be sort of at this point. Totem skills scale really well as you're leveling up as well, so you don't really need to worry about trying to stack crit early and things like that. They're going to natively do a lot of damage because they're totems, and the beauty of them is you just cast them next to the enemy and they just fuck everything up for you, so it's pretty lazy playstyle, which is why I love this type of build. So anyway, we come to the level 70 tree. So we come down and get Primal Manifestation, and this is going to increase our totem damage, totem life, and duration. We're also going to pick up our first sort of armor nodes here before we start branching out into our cluster jewels. Disemboweling to start getting crit. You're going to want Barbarism, and obviously our life masteries. Juggernaut, you're going to want Utmost Might because of strength stacking and increased attributes. More life wheel nodes here. We'll come down and get Golem's Blood and life as well. And then you'll come across, you'll get Surveillance, Panopticon, which is significant because this one actually increased 50% increased buff effect to your totems. As we were talking about at the start of the video, this is a really significant effect. And then we're going to grab Ironwood as well, which increases your totem's armor, life, and their overall survivability with elemental resistances. And when we get to the Ascendencies, I'll explain that more as well, because the totems become immune to fire, which is really good. So then basically we go to the level 96 tree or 94 tree, and this is when we finally add in our cluster jewels. So the cluster jewels that I was running was Veteran Defender, Fuel to Fight, Martial Prowess, and this is focusing on accuracy, damage, and shields, because we still have a shield, so increasing defenses on shields is really good. And then we got Ancestral Echo and Ancestral Guidance. Ancestral Echo actually gives you increased attack and cast speed, so the more attack speed on your totems, the better, and more placement speed. And then the second cluster that we had here was Ancestral Guidance again, so we double stack that node. And then Sleepless Sentries, which is going to give you and your totems Onslaught. Or it's going to give you Onslaught, sorry, if you summon a totem recently, which is pretty significant, because then your movement speed goes up, so you're really mobile. And then finally, we will grab another one up, another large cluster up here. Again, weighted advantage. Now, this one's a little more expensive and more endgame focused, hence the tree being at level 94 to 96. This is going to allow your skills to do double damage, 4% chance to do double damage while wielding a mace, which applies to your totems. And then we have Fuel the Fight again, increased attack speed, which affects your totems, and Martial Prowess again, which affects your accuracy, which in effect affects your totems. So at the end of all of this, your chance to hit hits 99%. Now, Ascendency wise, generally I've went with, So I've usually went with War's Herald first, mainly because you get Leech and it buffs up your totems. You want to get Moon's Presence next. This is going to increase the area effect of your totems and decrease the level of damage your totems take and make them immune to fire damage. Now, you could interswitch these two. It's entirely up to you. If you're struggling up to level like 35 or whatever it is when you hit your first lab and your totems are dying a lot, then yes, you could do this. Otherwise, you could go the other way and you could have them do more damage. Entirely up to you what you want to do. Then you run Sun's Light for damage penetration, and then Death's Fury. This is going to give you increased strength, and it's going to cover rare or unique enemies in Ash for 10 seconds on hit as well. So there is that. That's going to increase your damage even further. Now, where are they? So your major gods you're going to want to run. I generally run Soul of Lunaris, and this is just going to decrease the effect of packs and mobs in maps, so you can run through without getting absolutely destroyed. And then I usually run Soul of Aberith on most of my builds, and that's mainly for the unaffected by burning ground, which tends to be a real pain in the ass ailment when you're playing a lot of things. That's pretty much it for the skill tree. So I'll put this POB in the description. You can use it, do what you want with it. It's entirely up to you. Okay, so just as a final note, obviously not recommending this as a starter, but if you want to play it, it's a theory crafted build. Go with it. This works with Consecrated Path. I've tested this build. Other people I've sent this to and have followed the video, and I'll put the original video in the description, have tested this build. Have a look through the comments. There was a lot of questions asked, and most people got it to work. So it's pretty easy. Follow this as a bit of a baseline. You'll probably get it to work. Do I know how the skill is going to ultimately work and synergize with this? No, we're just testing this right now. But if you want to play one of the new skills, this would be one way to try it at least. And not going to say guaranteed to work, but there's a higher probability that this will be a much more enjoyable playstyle for you than trying to self-cast it, because that seems like it's going to be crazy to try and gear it up. But anyway, yeah, so there is notes in this tree as well as to how everything works. Follow them. Early leveling, you can pretty much early level with Volcanic Fissure because it looks like it's an Act 1 skill, so, you know, go crazy with that. So you need Earthbreaker and Volcanic Fissure and you're on your way. That's about it that I'll probably say about this build. If you've got questions, put them in the description below, and always welcoming invitational commentary down there. Keep it polite to each other. I like seeing people help each other in the comments, because my channel's more around helping people, not around casting flame at people. Excuse the pun, because we're talking about a fire build. Anyway, if you like this video, like and sub to the channel. There's a whole heap more coming out. I did break my mic today, but I somehow managed to thread it back together with duct tape, which, you know, just proves how great duct tape is. And yeah, anyway, stay filthy and looking forward to playing the new league with everyone. Anyway, until next time, bye.